Well, there's some big news yesterday. Pitt had some players make the All-ACC teams, the first team, second team, honorable mention, and whatnot. That's a big deal. Some great recognition from those guys. There was also more Pitt players who went into the transfer portal yesterday. I think 4 more went in yesterday. I think the total is up to 7 as of when we recorded this last night. So, there's some big stuff to talk about there. But you know what? It's all going to have to wait because today is signing day. Welcome to signing day 2024, folks, as Pitt will be signing the recruiting class of 2025. Signing day 24 because it happens in 2024, but you could call it signing day 2025 because they're signing the class of 25. Whatever you want to call it, it's happening today. It's earlier than ever, but it's happening, and it's happening today, December 4th, 2024. It's signing day. And, I'll say right off the bat, I mean, we got a lot of stuff planned today. It's going to be an exciting day at Panther-Lair.com. We're going to have a lot of good stuff for you on the website and on the message board. We're going to have a lot of good stuff for you right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We're going to have a live stream at 10 a.m., which is going to be a lot of fun. I think by that point, most of the letters of intent should be in. And so, you'll watch this thing first thing in the morning, this Morning Pitt. And then we'll have all the coverage at Panther-Lair.com as all the letters roll in. We'll have capsules and bios and all those kinds of things about all the players that Pitt got. And then at 10 a.m., we'll be live right here for a special signing day live stream to talk about all the signees that have come in and what the class looks like and what we think. And you can get your comments and questions. So you can listen to me today, right now, this morning, previewing the class. And then, at 10, we can get together and you can post your comments and questions. We can have a conversation about the class. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll do a little live stream right here. And then Pat Narduzzi's going to have a press conference at noon, and some of the assistant coaches will talk as well about the recruits. And then, of course, we'll have our signing day or our regular weekly Panther-Lair show. We'll do that at 8 o'clock tonight because of the Pitt basketball game that starts at 9:15. So there's lots of stuff. We're going to have lots of content for you. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be like signing day. We know how it goes. It's always a lot of fun to do it. But I understand if for some people signing day isn't quite the big event that it used to be. I understand if for some people signing day has lost a little bit of its luster because maybe for some people recruiting has lost a little bit of its luster. And I think the biggest reason why that might be the case, and I sense it, and sometimes I even sort of feel it myself, and I think one of the reasons, maybe the biggest reason that might be the case, is the transfer portal. And I think it cuts two ways, the transfer portal, of how it affects the way we view recruiting, high school recruiting, and the way we view signing day, which used to be the biggest day on the recruiting calendar. It still is the biggest day on the recruiting calendar. It's just maybe not as big as it used to be. And I think there's two reasons why, and they're both related to the transfer portal. One, a lot of guys leave. A lot of guys that your school signs leave. Now, it was always the case that you would only hit on a percentage of your recruits anyway. Not everybody you signed, if you signed a class of 25, not all 25 are going to be all conference players or starters or even 2D players. You're going to have a certain percentage, probably a significant percentage that didn't pan out, that didn't turn into contributors for your team. It might be 10 out of 25. It might be 15 out of 25, depending on the year. You might feel good if you got 10 starters out of a recruiting class, depending on the size that you signed. And so that's always been the case, that you weren't always, but at least those guys would be around for a while. Now, a lot of guys who aren't playing are going into the transfer portal. A lot of guys who are only in their first or second year are going into the transfer portal. And some guys who are playing and contributing are going into the transfer portal because they want an opportunity somewhere else. And so it's sort of, I think there's a feeling among fans, college football fans, that to some extent, all right, this class is coming in, but I mean, half these guys are going to transfer anyway. So you lose a little bit of the interest. I think another way the transfer portal has affected the way we view recruiting and signing day is that I think it's overshadowing high school recruiting. I think the pursuit of transfers has come to overshadow high school recruiting to a certain extent because, let's be honest, or if you're sitting right here as a Pitt fan here on December 4th and you've just watched your team lose 5 games in a row, a really disappointing end to a really promising season. It started off 7-0 and they finished 7-5, and who knows what happens in the bowl game, but you're looking for a way to bounce back. You want to know how this team is going to get better next year. Why is 2025 going to be better than 2024? And the answer to those questions is not in the 2025 recruiting class. It's highly unlikely that anybody Pitt signs today is going to have a significant impact on the team's fortunes next season. A couple of them will play. Half dozen or so will not redshirt. They'll be part of it. They'll, maybe on the 2 deep, maybe not, but they'll play. But if Pitt turns it around next year, it's going to be because of the transfers. It's going to be because of the guys they hold on to that they don't lose to the transfer portal and the transfers they bring in to help. Look, the biggest thing Pitt needs for next season, and we've talked about this and we'll continue to talk about it, they need offensive linemen. They need offensive linemen out of the transfer portal, both for the starting lineup and for the 2 deep. Okay? They need to give Eli Holstein protection and give him time. That's not going to come from the four offensive linemen they're signing in the 2025 recruiting class. It's not. It's going to come from the transfer portal. And so the need for sort of immediate improvement, immediate gratification, that's all going to be served by the transfer portal far more than it's served by the recruits they signed today on signing day. So I think it gets overshadowed a little bit by the transfer portal and the pursuit of transfers. The pursuit of transfers it has more sort of immediate effect than the pursuit of high school recruits. And that's not to say that the high school recruits are unimportant or that it doesn't matter who they sign, but your success next season is going to depend on how you do in the portal, not how you do on signing day for the vast majority of schools across the country. Now, I also think for the vast majority of schools across the country, signing day is still very important. I think high school recruiting is still very important. I think that's where you're still going to build the foundation of your program for years to come. In your ideal scenario, you're able to go into each year with the foundation sort of built from recruiting, from identifying talent and developing it over the course of a couple of years. And then you top it off, you fill in a few holes from the transfer portal where you have a space, where you need a starting tackle or 2 starting tackles, where you need a pass rusher or whatever it may be. You go grab those guys from the transfer portal and fill it in. And so it's still very important. I think you're still going to have more than half of your roster is going to come from high school recruiting. So you're still building that foundation of your program this way. And signing day is very relevant as such. But I understand if it gets a little overshadowed or people's interest in high school recruiting has waned a little bit. I think another element too that plays into it is the uptick in decommitments that we've seen over the past 5 years or so. Since they started having the June official visits, where recruits could take their official visits in June, and a lot of guys commit on those weekends in June or maybe early July, and then you get to the end of the recruiting cycle, you get through November, and other schools start poking around, and they bring you in on an official visit, and now they're flipping your commitment. You get these late cycle decommitments, which was always a thing, but I think it's become more prevalent now that because it used to be a thing, like in 2005 or whatever, you might have some, competition for your commitment. You get a commitment from a kid in June, you got competition late in the cycle, but you're able to bring them in for an official visit and remind them why they love Pitt so much. But nowadays, if the kid already took his official visit in June, he can't come back for another official visit. He's going to take one to each school. And so he can't come back for another official visit in December to try and hold on to that commitment. And so I think the decommitments, I think the potential for transfer down the road, and the fact that the transfer portal is just more sort of immediate in terms of what you can add, has all contributed to recruiting maybe not being the giant glowing sun at the center of the universe that it used to be. But it's still big. It's still important. These 19 recruits that Pitt is signing today are still very, very important to the future of the program and where they'll be going forward. 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028. These guys are significant and important. And for a program like Pitt and most programs, you still need to get it right more than you get it wrong on signing day. You can fill in the holes with the transfers, and that's great, but you need to still be able to go find good high school talent. And I think Pitt has gotten some good high school talent for this year's recruiting class. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about it. The 2025 recruiting class, it's signing day. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's like the second day in the row we've had like a long intro before we get to the music. I was thinking maybe I'll just skip the music, but I like to go to the music, and then come out of the music and welcome you to the Morning Pit. We're here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com on signing day. Depending on when you watch this video, the fax machines may already be rolling. Starting at 7 a.m., recruits can start submitting their letters of intent to the school. Of course, we'll have lots of coverage for you at Panther-Lair.com as all the letters roll in. We'll be posting all kinds of content. We'll have tons of stuff for you to get caught up on the recruiting class so you know everything that's going on and who these guys are. In case you forgot anyone, we'll have everything that you need on the message boards and on the front page at Panther-Lair.com. And like I said, at 10 a.m. today, we will have our signing day live stream. So we'll talk about everything in real time right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hopefully you can tune in for that. All right, let's talk about this recruiting class. 19 guys in the class, 10 offense, 9 defense. Kind of a unique imbalance there. I think more often than not, at least anecdotally, it feels like Pat Narduzzi typically tends to sign more defensive players than offensive players. This year's class has 10 and 9. Even if you take out some of the decommitments, I think they've pretty much had an even balance there. It all sort of favored the offense, even with those guys in the class. So let's start on defense, all right? And we'll get to the offense in a second. I think this class, not surprisingly, has a really good group of defensive backs. That sort of seems to be the model for Pat Narduzzi's recruiting classes, and I think this is certainly one of them. At cornerback, they've got 4-star prospect Mason Alexander. According to the Rivals database, which dates back to about 2002, he's the only recruit from the state of Indiana to ever sign with Pitt, at least in the last 22 years. So that's something. He's also the only 4-star prospect in the class, a good cornerback recruit. And then the other corner in the class is Sean Lee. Kid from Harrisburg. He's at Milford Academy this year because he was ruled ineligible for his senior season. But before that happened, he was just a do-everything versatile athlete. The true definition of find your best player and put the ball in his hands any way you can. And so Sean Lee for the last 2 years was outstanding as a quarterback, a running quarterback who also threw a lot and then played a ton on defense as well. Just the best athlete on the field. And I think when you watch Sean Lee's film from his years at Harrisburg, it's some of the best film in the class. I mean, there's some guys, the offensive skill guys in particular, their film is pretty eye-popping. It's fun to watch. Sean Lee's film is right up there. It's as good as anybody's in the class. It might be as good as anybody's in the state of Pennsylvania, to be completely honest with you. I think Sean Lee's film might be as good as any other recruit in the 2025 recruiting class in the state. He's just that good, and he's going to play corner at Pitt. 2 safeties, Cole Woodson and Josh Gurrier. And really with all 4 of these guys, all 4 of these defensive backs, Alexander, Lee, Woodson, and Gurrier, there's a lot of speed. Like, these guys just can really get out and run. And, there's no substitute for speed. Otherwise, I think these 4 just look like a good fit for Pitt's defense. And I think this defensive staff has gotten really good at identifying what they need, what they want, what they're looking for, and what fits in their defense. You look at the corners, Alexander and Lee. You look at the safeties, Woodson and Gurrier. And we've seen in the last couple of years, defensive back prospects in Western Pennsylvania not get pursued by Pitt because the staff just didn't feel like they were a good fit for the defense. And given the results of the recruiting and the development over the past 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, I would be hard-pressed to disagree with them. I think they've got a really good feel for what they want in their defensive players, particularly in the secondary and also at linebacker. We've talked about this a lot when we talk about Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles and Braylon Lovelace and Jordan Bass, and even the guys that came in last year, Marcelin and Cam Lindsey and Davin Bruton. I mean, like, this staff has really sort of honed in on the kind of players they want. And I think this year's linebackers as well. Manny Taylor, the guy who's kind of a wide receiver a little bit, but one of these athletic outside linebackers, Justin Thompson, another bigger, rangier guy. Like, they've really honed in on what they want in the back 7, what kinds of players, what physical traits they look for, what kind of mental makeup they look for, the athleticism, the explosiveness, the ranginess, the size, the speed. And they got it. I think all 6 of these guys, 2 corners, 2 safeties, 2 linebackers in this 2025 recruiting class, I think they all just look like they fit really well with what this staff likes. Up front, they got 2 defensive ends and a defensive tackle. The DNs are both really interesting. Denham Cook is a guy who's about 6'3", 240, 245. Plays as like a stand-up pass rusher, an outside linebacker. He'll just put his hand on that's what he does in high school. He'll put his hand on the ground at Pitt, and I think he has a chance to be pretty good as a defensive end. And then Julian Anderson is a guy who can play tight end as well. A big athlete. He's only about 220, 225 pounds, so he's going to need to add some weight to play defensive end, but I think he's intriguing enough with his athleticism, and he's a year older. He did a post-grad year, so I think there's a lot to like in that package. And they only signed one defensive tackle. They brought in 3 last year with Jasir Whittington and Francis Brew and Ty Uhas. And so they're only bringing in one, Trevor Summers from St. Thomas Aquinas. I think that they probably feel like that offsets it. I think they've got some good young defensive tackles on this team, so I could see getting away with only one tackle in this class. They're going to need to bulk up the numbers, though, going forward for sure. So that's the defensive group. You flip over to the offensive side of the ball, and they signed 4 offensive linemen. That's really where the numbers get boosted. This is most in any position group. 4 offensive linemen in this class, 2 tackles and 2 guards. This comes after they signed 5 offensive linemen last year. And, we did a piece on Panther-Lair.com yesterday kind of tracking the recent history of Pitt's offensive line recruiting, really the last 5 years. And, there are some smaller classes in there. There's some years where they only took 2 guys or maybe even 3 guys along the offensive line. They take a bigger class like 4, but then they take 2 or 3 each of the next couple of years. Well, here they're going back to back. They took 5 last year, 4 this year, really kind of restocking the numbers. Now, again, these guys aren't going to help protect Eli Holstein next season. God willing. They won't need these guys to protect Eli Holstein next season. With any luck, they'll be able to rely on veterans, but they're, and portal guys, which is what they're ultimately going to try and bring in, is a bunch of offensive linemen from the portal to play. We'll see what these guys end up growing into. Most intriguing here, Akram El Nagmi, an offensive tackle from England, who's coming over overseas. He'll enroll in January. And then Shep Turk, an offensive guard, 2-way lineman at Thomas Jefferson. And look, I'll take all the Thomas Jefferson linemen. I mean, like, if there's somebody the coaches feel like can play and he's a TJ lineman, I'll take him. I know Noah Palmer didn't really pan out. Devin Danielson maybe didn't reach the level that everybody had hoped he would get to, but if you got a lineman from TJ and he seems like he's a D1 prospect, I'll take him. You'll get no arguments from me on that. Skill position guys, they've got 2 that they're signing, or 4, that they're signing. 2 receivers and 2 running backs. Really intriguing guys. The running backs, Sinquan Smith and Jakarian Turner. Really, all 4 of these guys are sort of in the same kind of body type, so to speak. They're not tall. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I mean, they're all shorter guys. Probably going to be listed 5'9" to 5'11", somewhere in that range. Probably reality is more like 5'8" to 5'10". And it tracks with the kind of offensive skill guys you saw Pitt add last year from the transfer portal with Poppy Williams and Sincere Lee and Desmond Reed. Not all exactly the same size, but they're all rather short. We know Cade Bell is not worried about short guys. He wants explosive guys. He wants guys who can open their hips, who can turn and run, who can make plays, who have speed. And that's what these guys have. The 2 running backs, Sinquan Smith and Jakarian Turner, tons of speed. Both loved how Desmond Reed was used this season. And, I think they're excited about being in that kind of a role. And then the 2 receivers, Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates, both really interesting guys. Kinsler, more of an all-purpose guy, I think 2 years ago. This past season, he had like 1,000 receiving yards, really kind of honed in and focused on wide receiver, made a lot of plays as a result. Bryce Yates is another guy who was best player on the team, put the ball in his hands. He was almost exclusively a wide receiver 2 years ago. This past year, he was a quarterback. He threw the ball, he ran the ball, made a lot of plays, scored a lot of touchdowns, was responsible for a lot of points. I think he had a couple interception returns for touchdowns. Just a playmaker. I think all 4 of these offensive skill guys are fast. They're explosive. They're not big, but they'll make plays. I do think this group could probably use some size added at some point, but we'll save that for another day. And then there's a tight end and a quarterback. The tight end is Max Hunt, comes out of Tampa, Florida, I think. About 6'4", 6'5", 220, 215, somewhere around there. Played wide receiver largely in high school, caught about 53 passes over the last 2 years. Decent number of touchdowns, made good plays there, but he's going to be lined up as a tight end. I think they would like to get more. I think in this offense, they would like to have the tight end be more of a big receiver than a smaller tackle. I think they would like them running outside. I think that's why they were excited about Jake Renda in the spring as a more athletic tackle. I think that's why they're excited about Malachi Thomas, and I think that's why they're excited about Max Hunt. Big, rangy, athletic guy who should be able to line up outside and make some plays. And then there's Mason Heinschel, the quarterback. He was one of the targets that Cade Bell really prioritized when he first got the job. He offered Mason Heinschel in February. Heinschel visited in early March and then committed at the end of that month. He's been one of Pitt's best recruiters ever since then, and he also had a great senior season as well. Led his team to its first league title for the first time, and led his team to their first league title since 1982. He was named Offensive Player of the Year in his district. Just put up big numbers, carried his team. He calls himself an improviser, and I think you can see that in the way he plays. He can throw, he can run, he can make plays. Shouldn't need Mason Heinschel for a couple years, and by then he should have a good feel for Cade Bell's offense. He's Cade Bell's hand-picked quarterback, and he should be ready to go. I think in a couple of years and potentially be a pretty good quarterback. So, you look at this class overall, 19 recruits in the class that we expect Pitt to sign today, projected to be somewhere ranked in the 40s, which is about where they usually end up. It feels like a Pitt recruiting class, to be completely honest. Really good defensive backs, intriguing linebackers, trying to get some numbers at offensive line, and maybe what we can probably expect to see out of this coaching staff. A real emphasis on speed and explosiveness at the skill positions, even if you sacrifice a little bit in terms of size. So I like this class. I like some of the potential in this class. I think there's some guys that are going to have a chance to break out. As we said, the more immediate impact will happen from the transfer portal, but we've got a lot of time to talk about that. Today's signing day, so we'll just focus on the recruits here. And like I said, at 10 a.m. this morning, we will be focusing on the recruits with our signing day live stream, I guess is what I should call it. The signing day live stream. That'll be at 10 a.m. this morning. We'll talk for about an hour before I head down to the south side for the Pat Narduzzi press conference. We'll also hear from some of Narduzzi's assistant coaches as they talk about the recruits. And then we'll have the live stream tonight at 8 o'clock right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Me and Jim Hammett will get together with you to talk about the recruits. Right here. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on the notifications. That way you never miss any of our Pitt video content. We'll have a lot of it today. We have a lot of it every day, but we'll have even more today. So make sure you tune in. All right. Thanks so much for getting up early with us for the Morning Pitt. And don't forget, we'll be live at 10 a.m. today for the live stream. Hopefully you can tune in then with your comments and questions. I look forward to it as always. So have a great morning. We'll catch up with you later this morning and then again tonight and then tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.